Good afternoon. Welcome to the latest Achieve More podcast. In this edition, we are going to meet and speak to a young man who has just undertaken an epic journey and adventure, which we will find out more about. Let me rewind the tape a wee bit to about November 2018. An email dropped into my inbox, and there was this random guy saying, I'm in China, I've heard the podcast, you guys were mentioned in it, I've done a wee bit of research, I love what you do, I want to raise some funds for you. So far so good, sounded amazing. And then the next paragraph went on to describe how he planned to cycle from China to Scotland in order to raise funds. I think at that point I was just about to switch my laptop off because we had some sort of crank winding us up. Purpose of today's podcast is to meet the man behind the bike and the journey, find out more about his motivation for it, the actual journey itself, and what next. So Ross, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me in. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for welcoming me here to talk about the journey.
Let's find out a wee bit more about the guy behind the bike, a bit of an introduction to you. Tell us about your background, where you grew up, where you went to school, what your interests were, and basically how you ended up in China.
Well, that's quite the story, but I'll try and break it down for you. So yeah, I grew up in Busby, not far from here. I guess I would say a kind of regular childhood, nothing special, nothing out of the ordinary. But at a kind of young age, I got into sport. I got involved in sport at quite a young age, and that was kind of the path that I chose to follow. All the way through high school, I was always kind of in different sports teams, and that's what I really enjoyed. And my parents always encouraged me to just do what I enjoy. They were never they never pressured me to think, what do you want to be when you're older? You should do this job, you should do that job. They were always just just do what you enjoy. So that kind of led me on this path of just doing, basically just doing what I wanted to do. And it kind of all worked out from there. So because I was involved in sport, I decided I would study sport at university with the ultimate aim of becoming a PE teacher. So I studied sport at Stirling University, and then after graduating, I wanted to kind of travel and explore, see a bit of the world. So instead of just applying straight away to do my postgraduate certificate in education, I thought I would go away, explore the world, get a little bit of experience teaching, and then come back to Scotland and do my teaching certificate. So that led me to China, where I was teaching English in kindergarten with some really dodgy company that was not legit. I arrived in China, the school had no idea about any internship, and there was no mentor teacher there. They had just sold me to the school as this fully qualified English teacher. But it allowed me to uncover another passion that I had, and that was teaching. And eventually, things worked out, and I parted ways with this company, and I got a job teaching PE in China. So the 5-month internship, at the end of it, turned into 3 years in a Chinese school teaching PE, and then completing my teaching degree online. And after 5 years in China, I was kind of ready to move on, ready to find the next kind of challenge in my life. I feel like I'd progressed a lot in those 5 years, from being a brand new teacher to leading my own department in one of the leading British international schools in Shanghai. I needed a new challenge, and I was very aware of the students that I were teaching was had all the opportunities and all of the chances in life to participate in sport, but I was very aware that there were children back in Scotland who didn't have those chances, didn't have those opportunities to take part in sport and basically find their passion, find their love, that chance that I was so lucky to have. And that's when I heard about Achieve More, just as Robert said, on a podcast, just listening away. And then, I shot off that email saying, I think I want to do something. I want to help out people in Scotland. yeah, how about I wanted to go home at the time as well. How about instead of taking a flight home, how about I just cycle it? And yeah, so that kind of crazy idea kind of grew arms and legs from there, and the real planning actually started. I was like, oh my god, what have I got myself in for? But honestly, it was probably one of the best, craziest ideas I've had.
Why cycling and why long distance cycling was is one question for you, and then the other is, when did you get your first bike in China? That's a great story.
So the first question, it's kind of interesting. Like I always enjoyed cycling, but I've never, and it's funny even now, I never described myself as a cyclist. But it's always just been something that I thought was quite fun. I used it to commute to work. Just like an old banged up bike with a basket. It would just be my way of getting about, and I liked it. It was fun, but I would never describe myself as like a hardcore cyclist. I love to travel. I love to see the world, and the thought of flying over all of these countries really kind of worried me when I could travel through them and experience the cultures, experience the sights. So being able to pass through those countries on bike at a kind of slow pace and really experience it all, that really fascinated me as well, and was something that I really wanted to do. Yeah, and then in regards to getting my first bike in China, as I said, I was broke when I first arrived. I had very little money. So I researched a little bit to find like a cheap second-hand bike market or somewhere where I could pick up one. And I took the Shanghai metro out to this place in North Shanghai, and walked around. There was this big market, like flashing neon lights and loads of like old tech, like karaoke machines and disco balls and like really old stuff. It was kind of like the Barras in its heyday, but like just with loads of stuff going on, but with like supersized Chinese version with loads of neon lights and Chinese characters everywhere. And I walked around there and couldn't see any bikes, and eventually I headed out and walked down a small side street to like another little market where there was actually a stall that had some bikes, and I was looking around at these bikes, and they were a bit expensive, quite out of my budget. And this guy wandered over to me and didn't speak any English, and I didn't speak any Chinese at that time. And I managed to kind of explain to him with gestures like, these bikes are too expensive. And they were all mountain bikes, and I wanted a road bike, something a little bit faster. So I motioned, I want some drop handlebars, I want like thin tires, and he seemed to know exactly what I wanted and motioned to follow him, and off we went on this little adventure down these back alleyways, like ducking under like laundry that was hanging from windows, and like around all these corners with like little like street vendors selling steamed buns and whatever like out on the street. And eventually we came around the corner, and he had this old, maybe about 70s style vintage road bike that was just perfect. I was like, I want this bike. And then we kind of managed to work out a price, and the price was more than what I had in the local currency. But in my wallet I had £50, 50 like British pounds, and that was how much he wanted for the bike, and the exchange rate worked out to be about £50. So I explained to him, like, I've got the money, I just need to exchange it into Chinese yuan, the currency. So he took me to the place where we could exchange it, and I gave it to the guy behind the counter, and he just looked at the money like, and he spoke English, but he just looked at the money like, yeah, we exchange British pounds here, but these are not British pounds. And I was like, what are you talking about? Of course it's British pounds. And when he showed me the note, I realised it was like Clydesdale Bank Scottish pounds. And obviously these people had never seen this type of money before. So yeah, then he was like, nope, can't exchange that here. We tried another like 3 places before eventually giving up and thinking, yeah, this isn't going to work. I'm not going to get this amazing vintage road bike. I'll just leave it and get something else. But then the guy who was showing me around, he had another idea and took me back through all the little side alleys, and into some little clearing in a park somewhere with about, it was maybe about 10 or something of guys sitting around on a little stool with a little table playing Chinese checkers, and took me up to the guy who just from his kind of interactions with him, I could tell that he was important, and the way that everybody else flanked him and kind of like stood by him, just kind of gave the impression that this guy was like the important, right? And so he turned to me and he spoke some English and was like, "You want to buy this bike, right?" I was like, "Yeah, I want to buy the bike." He's like, "Well, it's 500 RMB, 500 yuan." And I was like, "Okay, but 50 pounds is the same as 500 yuan." He's like, "Yeah, 50 pounds is the same as 500 yuan." I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Okay, so you give him 50 pounds, he gives you the bike." I was like, "Are you sure?" And I looked at the other guy and he was like, nodded, "Yep, yeah, I'm sure." So I gave him the 50 Scottish pounds, which he would never be able to exchange in China. I mean, unless he got on a plane and flew to Scotland, I think it was pretty worthless. But I cycled off on my new road bike, and that was me on two wheels in China, kind of exploring the cities, getting about, having adventures, and yeah, that's how it all started.
So let's fast forward. You got it into your head, you were coming home to Scotland, that you weren't going to fly, you were going to cycle, and that at the same time you were going to raise funds for Achieve More. However, you did fly home. You came home to visit family in the Easter of 2019, and that was the first opportunity that you'd had to actually see Achieve More in action. And you come up to the Easter holiday camp. What were your first impressions?
So I'm used to putting on programs for the group of kids that I had in Shanghai, but nothing to the scale. The scale that Achieve More were delivering to these kids over the Easter holidays was incredible, and just to see like so many kids being so happy and so engaged and having something to work towards and having something to participate in over the holidays was incredible. It was really special to see like the amount of kids and how excited they were just to be able to take part in all of these sports and all of these activities. So that the main thing really that blew me away was just the scale of the operation and the number of kids that were able to take part, and the number of kids that were really being impacted and enjoying the kind of the work that Achieve More are doing and benefiting from the work that Achieve More are doing in some of these communities around Glasgow.
I think the important thing for us was understanding the commitment that you were making, and the hope that you had for raising about £10,000 as part of the journey to come to Achieve More was to show you how that money would be used for the best interests of kids, and we hope we did that, and you certainly made a few connections with some of the kids on that trip up to the camp. And at the same time, you also get interviewed for BBC Radio Scotland.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, I spoke to John Beattie on the John Beattie Show. That was my first kind of media outing, I guess, and I hope I'm a little bit less nervous this time than I was on his show.
Came across as nervous at all. Came across as bonkers. That was great, and again, I think I was really pleased that there was that level of recognition of just the sort of scale of this adventure. I know there's people who cycled around the world in their lives, but your motivation for doing this, seeing countries raising funds for a local charity, I think that really resonated with a lot of people. It really did. So then it comes to the time to set off. July 2019. Any doubts as it became closer?
From the whole time in the preparation, the scale, I guess, of what I was attempting to do never really hit me. I was never fazed at all by what I was setting out to do up until the night before, and that's when it started to sink in, and I was like, what am I doing? Like even when the whole kind of planning process, when I was putting together all the equipment I needed and I was packing, and it never really hit me, just like what I was about to embark on. And even the night before, I don't I don't know if it really hit me, but that's when I started to get kind of a little bit of nerves, I guess. I remember lying in bed and saying to my fiance, like, what if I don't make it? Like, I've kind of put it out there, right? I've put it out there that I'm going to do this thing, right? And what if I don't? Like, there's so many people now who are kind of invested. People had already started donating, like, some people who are invested in this thing that I've said I'm going to do. And there was parts of the journey, that I hadn't planned yet. I had no idea how I was going to get through parts of northwest China, like the area of Xinjiang, which is like very closed. There's a lot of stuff going on there that the Chinese government don't want to talk about. I had no idea if I was going to get through there. So these things were kind of running through my mind, like, yeah, what if it's actually not possible? And I just said to everyone that I'm going to do it. But the next morning, as soon as the wheels started turning, those doubts and those kind of worries were forgotten, and it just became, I'm just cycling, I'm just turning the pedals, that's all I've got to do, right? Like, all the other worries were just, if a problem comes up, we deal with it when it comes up, and that's how it was. That was how the whole trip went. I never worried. If problems came up, we dealt with those problems. We figured out how we were going to do it, and yeah, that's just how the whole trip went.
First thing I wanted to say is, I knew China was big. I didn't realise just how big it took you about 2.5 months to get across China.
When I think back on the trip, and I think back on the kind of struggles I had, or low moments or low points, and they all have one thing in common, and they all stemmed from the weather, right? Mm-hmm. And this is something that none of us can control. But when you're out in the open and you're exposed, and you're not in a car or a plane or whatever, you're traveling like literally by bike, you're so exposed to the elements. And when I think back, any kind of hard times I had were always related to the weather. So I had times when it was minus, the coldest temperature I cycled in was minus 15 degrees, and yeah, I remember like being genuinely worried that I was going to get frostbite in my toes and my fingers, and then thankfully this never happened at minus 15, but I think the coldest puncture I had to change was about minus 7. And just your fingers being so frozen, trying to get the tire off the rim is really difficult, really challenging. And in times like that, like you literally have no other choice but to persevere. So I think when you get put into situations like that, when you have no other choice but to persevere, then you learn, right? You learn, like, okay, actually I can do something. I can do something that I thought was really, really difficult. Like, fixing my bike in these temperatures is really, really difficult. But if you've got no other choice, you find out, okay, actually you can do it. And then for the next time when you come to face a difficult situation in life, like, okay, I've been here before. I know it's going to be hard, but I know if I persevere, then I'm going to get through this, right? And we'll come out of it. We'll come out the other end, and things will work out. The camping in Croatia was probably the one point of the trip where I thought I might die, and it was a long stretch of kind of coastal road where there was no town that had a hostel or hotel or anywhere to stay. So I would have been camping, which ordinarily would have been perfect because it was beautiful. It was a beautiful stretch of road. I would have loved to have camped there, but it just so happened that the time that I was cycling that road and camping out there, Croatia were experiencing a really bad storm. Is what they call in Croatia Bora wind, and it's just known for being really, really, really strong wind. And I tried to find some sheltered place. So there was a few trees and a little stone wall that had been built up. So I was like, I can camp behind this, and hopefully it'll break the wind. And I got everything set up, and my tent is just swaying from side to side, and I managed to cook up dinner on my stove, and got inside the tent and was like, okay, it's going to be a rough night, but I'll just get through it. The tent poles like collapsed in on top of me, with the wind just like pressing down. I felt like there was like people outside the tent like shaking it and pushing it down on top of me, but it was just the strength of the wind. It really started to pick up, and the wind started to get a lot worse. And then eventually one gust of wind came and just picked the entire tent up with me inside, and I don't know how far I came off the ground, but it lifted me and all of my bags completely off the ground, and then like slammed me back down. And at that point I was like, okay, I don't think I can do this now. I need to reevaluate and find a different strategy of getting through this night. Managed somehow to pack up my tent and my sleeping bag and get it back on the bike, and then push my bike back down the road because there was no way I was able to get on and ride. And as I was coming into the village, at the start of the village, I noticed a bus stop that literally had 4 stone walls and a roof, and I went inside, and it just was the perfect shelter. It had a little wooden bench that I could put my sleeping bag out on, and yeah, it sheltered me just perfectly, and that was the happiest I've ever been in my life, to come across a bus stop. And that was my night, and from what could have been a kind of disastrous night, it turned out to be a really kind of pleasant night. It was cool to be in those like safe little 4 walls and just be watching the kind of carnage of the storm blowing past outside. So definitely at the time it wasn't a great situation, but looking back on it was one of my favourite memories of the trip.
I think it's great to hear about these things, but the amazing thing through all of that was that you were able to do a bit of filming, and you brought it to people, just the reality of the situation. So again, just to emphasise the Ross and the Road, and the vlogs are there on YouTube, through the website for you to have a look at, and it brings these experiences to life. We met up in Monaco, cycled for 5 days, and then left you, get the train back to the south of France to fly home. I remember sitting out waiting my train from Marseille to Nice. Beautiful sun, lovely, just enjoying it. And then the next day you sent me a photo cycling in the snow in the middle of France. It was just bonkers.
That was part of the reason why I didn't hit those 21 countries. When I got to northern France, and it was freezing, it was really heavy snow. There was no way I was going to head up to do Luxembourg and Belgium, which is what I planned on doing. So I cut straight across France to kind of get back, which worked out to be really good, because I arrived back home literally just before the lockdown happened. So yeah, the maybe like the fanfare or the welcome home that I had expected was cut a little bit short, just because of the kind of restrictions that were already in place to keep everybody safe because of COVID. So
let's look at the positives, the highlights of the journey. What stands out for you? You did 19 countries, don't be too hard on yourself. You managed 19 countries. Across those 19 countries, what stood out for you as the memories that keep coming back to you?
So definitely, I think that one of the main things that stands out, one of the main things that I can take from this trip is the sense and the feeling of community, and a kind of appreciation of how other cultures approach community and how important it is to them. And I think there's a lot that we can learn from that, and about just how important that community is. So for example, those countries that I cycled through in Central Asia, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, and a lot of the Tibetan regions in China, they place such a strong emphasis on community, helping each other, looking out for each other, simply because if they didn't, they wouldn't survive. They need to look out for each other. They need to if someone has, you know, an extra goat in their herd, you know, they need to that they're going to eat, they need to share it, right? They need to share their resource, they need to pool their resources. So literally it's a byproduct of their environment, is that culture is community is super important to them. And I was, you know, really fortunate enough to be able to experience that cycling through. You know, they could see that I was experiencing the same elements that they experience on a day-to-day basis. When they're out, you know, tending their flock, they're just as exposed to the elements as I was when I was cycling through these places. So that sort of hospitality and that sort of community was extended to me as a visitor in these countries, and I would always be invited into their tent. You know, a lot of these nomadic countries, they still live in tents when they move between, you know, summer and winter pastures to tend their flock. And you know, without this hospitality, you know, without this kind of welcome, it would have made my trip a lot more difficult. So this was one of the major kind of the takeaways that I had from my trip, is just how nice it can be when communities look out for each other. And I think in a lot of developed countries, with the likes of technology, and perhaps we've seen this come back as a kind of positive byproduct of COVID, but it did seem to be less and less important, was that sense of community, sense of looking out for each other. Everyone was kind of in their own, staying in their own lane, you know, looking out for themselves rather than looking out for each other. And that really kind of ties in with the work that Achieve More does, of kind of creating this community and being there for each other and looking out for each other. And you know, I've seen it in other parts of the world. I've seen how effective it can be, and I've seen how you know, how it can literally be a matter of life and death in these countries. So it is really great that we have organisations here in Scotland that recognise the importance of this and are doing a really great job to kind of promote it.
I think, I'm not necessarily one who sort of thinks of higher beings, but there is an element of me thinks that, you know, someone was watching over you and that journey, said he's doing a great thing, we're going to look out for him. And you know, there were people along the way in that journey who were there to help you along the way. Read into that what you will, but again, I know, because I know the story, that there were some amazing people and some amazing experiences which would restore your faith in humanity. Having spent 5 years in a metropolis which is just 100 miles an hour, and I think in many of these cities across the world, people were looking out for themselves, but you know, you had those experiences where people were looking out for each other, which is absolutely amazing. Couple of quick questions. Favourite country?
It would have to be Georgia. My favourite country that I experienced cycling through would have had to be Georgia, and this again just ties right back in with what I said, and it was because of this just sense of community and welcoming and openness of the people. The people there are just so incredible, so incredibly friendly, and everyone's looking out for you there. And I had experience where I was unable to find a hostel somewhere to stay in this town, and was taken in by this couple who were like 95 and 90 years old, and they were just the most friendly, welcomingest people I've ever met in my life. Like the feeling that I got from staying with this old couple was like being at my grandparents' house. They literally treated me like I was their own grandchild, and I was just some, you know, vagabond cyclists passing through their town, but to them I was, you know, like I was their grandchild. And that's what you get when you're in Georgia. You get welcomed in as part of a big family, and the people in Georgia, like, they literally do welcome you as part of their family. And yeah, that was incredible. It was really, really powerful, really such a great feeling to be welcomed as part of someone's family when you were just, you know, passing through the country.
And I think you also get serenaded by them.
Yeah, the Georgia is known. I don't know if this is a you know, tourism point, but Georgia is known as the birthplace of wine, and it definitely shows when you're there with some of the residents. You know, a lot of them grow their own grapes and make their own wines. So after dinner, the 95-year-old guy got his own homegrown bottle of wine out, and we had a few glasses, and we started playing some traditional Georgian instruments, and yeah, it was just a great experience to be welcomed into their family.
I mean, I don't think we can really do justice to all of the amazing experiences that you had in the space of a podcast. So I'd like to bring it up to the end of the journey. How did it feel getting back to Glasgow? How did it feel just arriving?
Yeah, it's such a
But then, of course, you get back, and as you've already mentioned, a week later, the country's in lockdown. So for that high of that journey over 8 months, seeing your family, being in the city chambers, bang, you're stuck in your parents' house for who knows, goodness knows how long. How did you feel your time over lockdown?
So this is something that I was actually I did a little bit of research into before I left, and it's quite common, you know, for people who've done big expeditions or trips like this, you know, around the world trips, or, you know, really, really kind of big journeys, that there's a kind of, you know, a reverse culture shock, or a little, like a lull, a depression of returning back to normality. So that was always something that I was kind of, you know, prepared for. But I guess no matter how much research or reading I'd done into other people's trips, you know, this is a once in a lifetime event. You know, nothing in the world could have prepared me for finishing the biggest journey of my life and then being told you're not allowed to leave the house, right? Like it's insane when you think back now. Like, so yeah, people who would do a trip like this might ordinarily struggle from the trip ending suddenly, but to have the trip end suddenly and then be told the world is in the grips of a global pandemic and no one's allowed to leave their house, like that really just kind of compounded that feeling of like, what now? So yeah, and I do have to say though, like the first few weeks, I was just happy to be in the one place, to be surrounded by my family, and to not have to worry about where I was going to sleep the next night. You know, from moving every single day for the past 8 months, it was nice to have a kind of base, you know, somewhere that I could just settle and relax and have my stuff not being in 4 bags on the back of my bike, you know. And so definitely it was nice just to have that kind of stability, you know, somewhere to be, somewhere to relax. But you know, after so long, you know, there's only so many, you know, woodworking projects and ginger beer making recipes that you can perfect, right, when you're stuck inside your house. So, and it's the same thing that everyone was experiencing, I guess, maybe heightened a little bit from the experience that I just had, but essentially everyone was in the same boat. So we were all kind of experiencing this together.
So, what next for Ross McKechnie on a personal and a professional level?
So I was lucky enough to interview for one of the leading British international schools in Malaysia, and fortunate enough to get offered that job. So that's next on my radar, but that's, you know, very, very recent. So a lot of the kind of nuts and bolts of that are still being worked out. But all being well, we should be heading to Malaysia to start a new adventure within the next 6 weeks.
We appreciate what you've done for us and the contribution that you've made, not just by the journey, but over the last couple of years in recent times. I think there's a couple of other thank yous that need to be made, because part of the purpose of this adventure was to raise money for the charity. There were some people who really worked their backsides off that whole period that I think deserve a bit of recognition, and I would rather you gave them the thanks than me, because it really, really helped motivate you throughout the journey.
Yeah, for sure. Like, a journey like this is not something that could be easily done without a large kind of support network. Not necessarily on the road, like physically supporting, but just kind of to have mentally to help push things and to really help with a side of it that when you're just focusing on cycling 100 kilometers a day, you're not really having the time to focus on chasing people up to donate and to think of different ways, raffles or different ways of raising funds. So definitely I had a really kind of strong network of family who were there to support me. All of my close family, mum, dad, sister, extended family, and my aunt Shirley, who had such a really kind of just an unwavering drive and passion to raise money for the charity. So she really got behind the journey and done a lot of fundraising work and used her contacts within various industries that she'd worked in to bring in big prizes for big raffles that she was able to put on in her work, and all of the staff within her work really got behind the journey as well, and they ended up raising like a large chunk of the overall amount that we raised was actually down to the fundraising that a lot of people have done on my behalf. So definitely I just did a small part of this. A lot of the kind of the funds that were raised and the impact that this journey is going to have is down to a lot of other people. So yeah, a massive thank you needs to be said to them for actually kind of doing the fundraising work and going out and getting these products that can be auctioned off and raising the money and really kind of getting behind the whole idea of doing something like this for a charity.
I echo exactly what you've just said. I don't think, no matter how long we spoke, that we can really do justice to what this whole journey has meant, the experience that you've had, the benefits to the organisation. I just want to conclude by saying, on behalf of the children, young people, families, Achieve More, thank you so much for having faith and confidence in what we do, and for undertaking a momentous adventure on behalf of the organisation. You're someone who is very much part of the Achieve More family, as I said before, and will forever be part of that family. And any time that you are back in Scotland, we should, still continue to get around the world and continue your adventures. It's very important that you come and you spend some time with us. So on behalf of everyone, Ross, thank you so much for everything you've done for the charity, and we look forward to the next stage of your adventures.
Yeah, absolute pleasure to be involved with the charity and to be welcomed as part of the family. And like we said, as a we, and it doesn't matter where I am in the world, I'm always going to have a vested interest in the charity and do whatever I can to contribute. Maybe it's not going to be, maybe I'm not going to cycle another 15,000 kilometres and raise another £15,000, but whatever I can do to kind of support and help the charity, no matter where I am in the world, is going to be on my mind.
All that remains for me to say is, Ross, continue to aim high and achieve more.
Thank you very much.